In a world that's loud, the church does not have to remain silent. In a world that's dark, the church can shine God's light. Welcome to Light Talks, where we dive deep into real conversations, not just echoing the world's noise, but shedding God's light on challenging topics. Let's talk.
Hey there, welcome back to Light Talks with 922 Ministries. We are here for part 2 of our marriage conversation with Dr. Brandon Steenbock. Thanks for still being here with us.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah. As always, if you have any questions or topics you'd like to talk about here at Light Talks, please submit them using the link in the description below. How did you, Jonathan? Was that a good intro?
Not bad.
All right.
Just so everyone knows who's watching, that was about take 3. That's okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
Sometimes you just got to get into the groove. It's a podcast. You're just talking.
Yeah,
All right.
it's
You did great. You
Okay.
did great. You're
Thank
going to be
you.
awesome. You're
I
an
like
awesome
it.
host.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So last time, hopefully you listened to part 1. If you haven't, you should pause this, go back to part 1, because it's going to lead into part 2. So we were talking about communication with
Yeah.
spouses.
Yeah.
And we were talking about forgiveness and all of these other things and how to have really important conversations. But I want to back up, because what if you can't have the conversations in the first place? What about being vulnerable? It's hard. And I think
Sure.
I've struggled with that in my marriage, like saying the hard things because
Yeah.
I don't want to make him feel bad, or I don't want to expose my vulnerability because I'm hurt or I'm sad.
Yeah.
So how do people get over that hump? Because I hope that I'm not the only one who's ever struggled with that.
You're not.
Nope.
You're not. And in fact, you said something off camera, Allie, about when couples become just roommates.
Yeah.
And that often happens when we don't have that acceptance of our own vulnerability, the willingness to just open up and say, I got to say these hard things. And I know, I've gone through seasons of life where that's been true for me. And it's not like I was like, I did that once and then I got over it. Now I'm better. No, it's more like a wave, like, or just like a roller coaster, where there are seasons where I'm like, I'm really good at the vulnerability thing. And I'm very good at telling my wife what I need and all of those things. And then other times where it's really hard. So I think maybe just to give ourselves some grace and say, if I'm struggling with that exact problem, totally normal. Just
I'm
the
not
way
crazy.
people are. No.
Great. That makes me feel better. Episode
absolutely. Yeah. That's a wrap.
Well, as a husband, too, sometimes I think it's when you see your wife is emotional, that there's maybe some anger or something happened.
Yeah.
It's hard to, like, you don't want to step into that. You're like, oh, I just need to let her be for a little while, which maybe goes back to our communication before.
Right.
For wives. I
Right.
know from a husband's standpoint, just hearing, I'm a little upset right now. Just give me a few minutes.
Yeah.
And, but I want to talk, having that communication is also, I know from my point of view, very helpful because I'm like, is she ready to talk? Does she want to talk? Is she still upset? Should I talk now?
Yeah.
Sure.
But the nice thing is knowing that you're there. I think that's like, you're like, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you good or are you not? But like, I think that's important, right? Instead of you just being like, I'm
So
going to
maybe
steer
from
clear.
from the guys like, hey, let me know when you'd like to talk. I would like to talk.
Yes.
Or saying that to communicate.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, back to you, Brandon.
So you guys are doing awesome on over there. I like it. I like all the stuff that you're saying. It's great. Just let me affirm you. Honestly, it can be hard to get back into the habit of sharing. And this is a thing that a lot of times when you first started dating, like, you were intensely vulnerable, right? You shared a ton of things about yourself with this person because you felt so strongly about this relationship and you wanted to just totally open up and say, I want to just be 100% authentic with this person because I want to be in a relationship. And then you moved towards marriage and you felt kind of like, well, now I know this person and they know me and we're comfortable. And then you get into marriage and the next thing you know, all kinds of stuff is still happening in your life and you're still changing and growing in a lot of ways. And you start to go, well, when do I talk about the hard things? Right? And then kids come along and then you got domestic duties and it's just easier to just hit the to-do lists and forget to talk about the important things. In our last episode, I talked about those 3 questions.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that the answer is partly in that and that was part of what raised your question.
Right.
Was you're like, okay, but how do you talk about the really hard stuff with that? Well, by practicing that. It's a little bit, I think of it a little bit like a drill, right? If you want to start playing guitar like Jonathan does, he's an amazing guitarist, right? But you've never picked up a guitar before. Do you start by learning, complex jazz chords and, really like syncopated strumming patterns? No. What you do is you just drill the scales. You figure out where the where your fingers go on the fretboard and you just drill how to get your fingers to them. And you do them over and over again, and it feels super unnatural at first. And eventually it becomes muscle memory. So when you approach this conversation idea like a drill, every day we sit down and we talk about this. Every day we ask ourselves these 3 questions.
Yeah,
Maybe
can we
it
talk about the
starts
3
out.
questions? Say them again. The 3
Yeah.
questions.
So the first question is, what's something that was positive about our relationship today? Right? Chance to share some positivity. That actually helps to open up the vulnerability because now we feel like, hey, we're connected a little bit. Question 2 is, what was something that wasn't so great about a relationship today? What's something I didn't like? And that actually is inviting those hard things. And then number 3 is, how can I help you? And so if I ask, how can I help you? Then I'm inviting the other person to say, this is something I need, right? And so this gives us that chance to actually say, I actually have this need. I know I've never told you, but I need it, or I want it, Those questions, when you start, you're going to want to do surface level stuff. And to give yourself the grace to do that.
Will it feel awkward too?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's normal.
Expect it. Sometimes the hard things are the best things to do.
Yeah.
It's
You're
true in life.
gonna feel awkward the first few times. And like I said, it's okay to go surface level the first few times to let yourself kind of ease into it, but then to work it like a muscle, right? It's going to take time. And eventually you'll start to feel more confident and more comfortable with it. So that's one thing. Another thing I think is really important though is to give space for connection so that you feel safe to share those hard things. So my wife and I had to learn that date night was something we had to plan, and B, we had to give ourselves a lot of grace on what does a date night look like.
Sure.
Especially when our kids were little, it was like, how do we have enough money to pay a babysitter and go out to dinner? Like this just blows an entire month's budget on one night. And now so what we figured out was date night's in.
Sure.
We're going to order up the Chinese food. We're going to put the kids to bed. We're going to get out the little tray tables. And we're going to...
Really fancy over there in the Steenbock household.
There were literally some nights where we were like, we don't even have enough money for Chinese takeout, but if we can go to the grocery store and get some Carl Buttig ham, like it was like $1.19 package, and a couple of like Kaiser rolls,
Yeah. You were living large.
Yeah. And the deli would give us the free packets of mustard, and
Wow.
we'd make the little sandwiches, and we'd sit there with our sandwiches. Maybe we play a board game, or we'd maybe watch something on TV. And that was one of the things we found really helpful, was actually watching like YouTube sermons or marriage talks, things that would actually open up conversation. Because then we start to connect. Nowadays, we're in a little bit better place, but we still try to make as often as we can, like Friday night is our date night, unless we've got company coming over. But if we don't have anybody over, Friday night, and we don't go fancy. Like we'll go to Culver's, and like she'll get a cup of chili, and I get a kid's meal, and we split it.
Yeah.
But the point is not to go and have a huge meal. The point is to just spend some time where it's just the two of us being intentional and talking to each other. So that space then gives us the opportunity to say, let's actually talk about stuff. And don't be afraid to use like weird tools. Like you can go and buy like those books that are like conversation starters, and they feel super cheesy, super hokey.
Yeah.
But I always kind of say this, like if you're not meeting each other where you are, and a worksheet or a book or whatever is going to help you, like just use the stupid worksheet, right? Get over yourself, like swallow your pride, take the worksheet, go through it, have the conversation, and then you'll end up stronger on the other side. So
I'm hearing you say intentional. Like this takes intentional work. If you don't think about it, it will pass you by.
absolutely. Yeah. So you got to do it on purpose, right? That's all intentional means, right? Is I'm just doing stuff on purpose.
Planning it.
But okay, so I got 2 young ones. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old now.
Okay.
And I have a lot of friends
You are in the
I'm in the thick of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in the thick of it.
I don't miss those
The
days.
trenches. Wow.
And I'm friends with a lot of other moms, right? They're like, I'm so busy. Like the thought of like slowing down enough to spend time with my husband, and also like I would like to have friends and my kids need my attention. How do I plan that in? Why is it even important? Like maybe this is just the season of life that we're in. So convince me. I'm convinced, but convince others of why they should take that time, because I think we're missing that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I talked in the last episode about a season of life where my wife and I were really disconnected. And then we turned off the cameras for a while, and I shared with you guys that, we were at a point where we were really low. Like we took one of these couple assessments and it said that we were like danger zone as a couple. And we were like, what do we do about this? And I actually went to a pastor friend who much older than me. He was a really great kind of counselor and listening ear. And I kind of just spilled everything that was going on about life and about ministry and about my marriage and all this stuff. And he said, do you and your wife ever go for a walk? No.
Yeah.
And he said, well, go for a walk. And I was like, we can't. We got little kids in the house. And he was like, okay. It's like, let's just be honest between you and me, Brandon. Would your kids be safe if you sat them in front of the television for 20 minutes and you just walked around the block where, you're just within sight of the house the whole time? And I was like, well, yeah. And actually at the time we lived on a corner. So the way our windows were, we could basically see into the house for like half of the walk.
So we need to move to a place with a corner.
Yes.
Lots.
Yes. There you go.
Maybe.
Yes.
But could you just do laps around the house? But like literally that 20 minutes of just walking together. And there's something that happens, especially for guys, just because of the way our brains work, when we have something else to focus on besides just looking eye to eye. This is actually really unnatural for guys. Like John and I are sitting here looking at each other across the table. Like, this is weird.
Yeah.
They did a study with kids once where they had like middle school kids come into a room and they put them in pairs and they had 2 chairs in the room. And they said, just grab the chairs, sit down and talk with each other for 15 minutes. And they would put in 2 boys, and the boys would grab the chairs and they'd set them side by side so they're both facing the same way, about 5 feet apart from each other. And they'd sit there and they would talk, not even like hardly ever glancing at each other. And then the girls would come in and they'd grab the 2 chairs and they'd turn them so they're angled towards each other.
Face to
so they're
face.
like, and they'd be like, their knees are touching and they're talking face to face.
Yeah.
And then when they would get, a boy and a girl to come in, they'd like set the chairs on opposite sides of the room and not even look at each other, not even talk.
Yeah.
But so guys need to have like something else to focus on.
Yeah.
And a walk gives that ability to do that. But then it also does this stuff where God is amazing. He designed our bodies so incredibly, right? And think about all of the positive hormones, the endorphins and all of that stuff that's happening when you start to go for a walk. Yeah. And that creates a sense of positivity. And so you do that with your spouse, you go for that 20-minute walk, you're going to start to feel better about things. And suddenly you're going to feel like, maybe I can bring up this hard topic for a minute. And then once again, it's like a muscle. You got to do it. You got to rip the Band-Aid off sometimes.
Yeah.
You just got to say, this is hard, but let me tell you this thing. At the end, you may be like, I wish I hadn't even brought that up.
Yeah.
Because now I feel like something is weird. But then you grow and you get past it.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you kind of go, I'm glad we talked about that thing, as hard as it was.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about the same angle of what both you guys are doing. A big, big, big issue, I think, in a lot of marriages is that kids get elevated above that spouse level, which was maybe a little bit behind the question that your pastor asked you, are the kids going to be fine? But you're like, kids are number one, got to make sure I'm focused on them. And I think the question behind is, are you going to prioritize that time with your wife?
Right.
But your kids are going to be not that you're going to neglect them. None of that. No.
I mean,
obvious.
we put them in front of a show that we knew was going to lock them in for 20 minutes. They're not even going to move.
Yes.
And literally, we would come back and they would both, and
Exactly.
at the time they were like 3 and 5. And I mean, both of them were just like slouched on the couch, eyes glazed over, staring at the screen. And we're like, we left you that way 20 minutes ago and you haven't moved since.
Yeah.
Like, we knew this.
That they'd be
They're
fine.
not going to, suddenly pull out all the knives and burn down the house and all of those things. It's just not going to happen, especially because we kind of prepped them for it. And we're like, hey, we're just going to be right outside. If you need anything, we'll be right there. You can just come outside and find us. We'll be right there.
Yeah, it was fine.
They never did. But after a while, it just became normal. Mom and Dad go for a walk.
They knew what to expect.
They knew what to expect. Mom and Dad go for a walk. We get to watch our show. And I'm not talking about letting the screen babysit your kid for hours at a time. I'm talking about 20 minutes.
20 minutes,
30 minutes.
Yeah, one little show.
This is okay.
Yeah.
Right? Give yourself that grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if it means strengthening your marriage and talking about the things that you need to talk about.
Right. If you're healthier as a couple as a result of this, your kids are going to be healthier in their whole life. And so it's okay.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to that episode, check back in our episode.
Go back.
He was back here talking about all of that. So if you're curious more on that topic, you can hang out with that.
Yeah, I think that's just, an honest question that every couple should ask is an issue sometimes behind all of this is, what is the priority level? It's so easy once the kids come. That is number one in our lives? What are they doing? They need the attention. We got to get them there. That you run out of time to have those date nights.
And it's fair
on
to
those
say
walks.
that, our kids do need a lot of our attention.
They do.
Because when they're small, we're their lifeline, right? They can only survive if we care for them. And I understand that. But it's about finding a balance.
Correct.
Right? It's about finding the space in that domestic life where you say, but we don't neglect the marriage. It's not saying, it doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
Yeah.
It can be a both
It's
and.
a both and, yep.
But the problem is when we ignore the marriage for the sake of the kids.
Yes.
We just can't do that.
No, not healthy.
Great. So, speaking of that, especially if you've got like little kids, what are some ways that couples can keep the spark alive and prevent the relationship
Oh, boy.
from becoming stagnant?
We're going there on Light Talks.
Here we go.
I like it.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
I want to preface it real quick. Like, sex is something that the church does not talk much about.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
I think for a lot of couples, they haven't had those conversations. They think sex is going to be sparks everywhere when you get married, but it's a lot harder. I think I mentioned this on when I was talking with Pastor Mike about dating. Something that I heard that stuck with me is sex. The devil likes to tempt sex before marriage,
Yes.
but he also likes to tempt the lack of sex in a marriage after
Yes.
you're married. He
Yes.
wants what's worse for you, which should tell you right off the bat. And Pastor Jim, one of our pastors, when he was here, I remember he said this. Have you ever thought about right at the creation story? What's the first thing that God told Adam and Eve? Be fruitful.
Increase the number.
Start having sex. It's
Yeah.
the very first words that God said to husband and wife
Right.
at the creation. So it's a huge, important, wonderful blessing from God. And I think that a lot of couples maybe haven't had that training or that had those conversations, and they're kind of going in blind.
Yeah. There are a number of different layers to this, right?
Yeah, there are.
Because
Yeah.
as you're saying, God has created this amazing and beautiful thing in marriage that I'm actually convinced that theologically we can say that sex is the deepest human reflection of the gospel that can exist.
Yeah.
And here's why I say that, because what is the gospel? That Jesus completely, 100% selflessly gives himself entirely for the good of his church. And then he calls his people to give themselves entirely back to him. And that there's this tremendous vulnerability, selfless giving, and intimacy that then is created by the gospel, right? And what is happening between a husband and wife in a sexual union is a reflection of that selfless self-giving on the part of both that creates intimacy. And from that intimacy comes new life, which is a reflection of the new life that the gospel creates in the hearts of everybody who comes to believe it. So, and I'm not trying to over spiritualize sex. I'm not trying to turn like sex into this like mystical thing. But what I think is part of our problem is we don't understand the power that sex has. And that's why so often couples dive into it before they're married without any really full understanding of how powerful this is for their hearts. And then when they are married, they don't recognize its power for keeping them close to each other. And so they don't prioritize it.
Yep.
And it turns into this kind of weird thing that's like, well, the culture is telling us what to do with it, which is do it as much as you can before you're married. And then, you get married and then that ruins your sex life, which is totally bonkers.
Yeah.
Do you know,
backwards.
by the way, that statistically speaking, do you know who's having the best sex in America? That is who, when people report their satisfaction with their sex lives, do you know who's?
I heard this.
I've heard this too. It's typically people who are further along in life, the older people.
But like I think it's early 50s of married couples.
It's people who have been married to the same person and only had sex with that person for more than 20 years.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, it's the old people. It's your parents. It's
So young couples, the best is yet to come. And
you aren't
thanks,
that good yet.
thanks for helping. Well, we just made you think of your parents and your grandparents right now.
it's terrible, right?
But isn't
it makes
that-
us think terrible.
But isn't that God pleasing? I remember
It's so
a
God-pleasing.
presentation where someone changed the terminology for sex. They said for a married couple, it's a God pleasing activity.
Yes.
He said, I'm just going to call it that from now on. So when you're engaging in God-pleasing activities, like he used
I like
that
that. I
terminology.
use that, yeah.
And because I think in the church, a lot of people have had the experience that that's a bad thing.
Yes.
We don't talk about that.
Right.
But it is a beautiful thing in marriage.
Yes.
And it is God smiles
Yeah.
at sex. He
Yeah.
loves it. He created it.
Well, and the Song of Solomon,
Yes.
right? An entire book of the Bible that is dedicated to a celebration of marriage and intimacy and sexuality.
Yeah.
There have been people who over the years who have tried to find ways to take the Song of Solomon and like allegorize it into things.
Yeah.
I once read Martin Luther. The most disappointing thing Martin Luther ever wrote was his commentary on Song of Solomon, where he compared it as an allegory to the government and the people. And I was like, okay,
No.
Luther, I love you. You have got amazing theological insights, but that is bonkers.
Not even close.
I don't even know where
Yeah.
you got that. But a lot of people have tried to make it, it's a picture of Christ in the church, which it can be. Like I just said, sex can be a reflection of the gospel truth. But ultimately, I think that that's trying to imprint something that the Bible isn't telling us. The Bible itself, when you look at the Song of Solomon, is just take it for what it is. It's a celebration. God celebrates this thing, right? So if we can start to understand it the right way as Christians and talk about it the right way as a church, I think that would help us, number one, with answering the question, why does the church keep saying don't have sex before you're married? In 2025?
Yeah.
dare they?
Yeah.
How
What?
dare they?
They're so out of touch.
How wild and crazy are you
Yeah.
people? And the answer is we're wild and crazy about things God has made. So, that's all it is. We just love the things God has done. And if we understand it right, then we can speak about it with some passion, right? But number two then is to really encourage couples to make this a priority in their life. Okay, so that's the question though, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Keep
How
the
do I
spark
make
alive.
it a
we-
priority?
First, can we set expectations? I remember being in premarital counseling with my husband, and the pastor, he was phenomenal. And he's just like, how many times a week do you think married couples have sex? And I remember going, I don't know. And I think my husband wrote a really high number. And I think he said one time a week. And I think we both were like, what? Because that's not what you see.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, can you start with maybe expectations if
Sure.
you're going into marriage?
Yeah.
And then, tackle that next question too.
So, going into my marriage, I was like, this is pretty much going to happen every day, right?
Yeah.
And my wife was like, this is pretty much only going to happen on Fridays, right? And we had to kind of find our way to what is the actual true middle ground. Biologically speaking, the average human male wants to have sex roughly every 3 days, 72 hours. That's when his body is going to start telling him, hey, I could use that. And he's not going to be able to articulate that unless he's really in tune with his body, because there's not nerve endings telling him that. It's just that just a buildup of seminal fluid, all that stuff. His body is like, hey. And that's why you see husbands after a few days, they start to get cranky, and their wives are like, why are you so cranky today? Maybe just take that as a temperature check.
Yep.
Look at when was the
My
last
time of week. Or,
Right,
yeah.
right. So if
Yeah.
you think about it, though, to go to the female side, though, what we found is that the more often a woman engages in sexual intimacy with her husband, the more often she's going to want to. So when there's a longer gap between, then her body's hormones sort of rebalance, and she just sort of forgets about it. She just stops thinking about it.
It's not our fault.
It's not
It's hormonal.
it's just there. It just
Yeah.
goes out of the mind, right? So what that says then is, okay, he wants it every 3 days roughly, and she's going to enjoy it more, want it more if it's happening more regularly. So every 3 days is 2 to 3 times a week on average, right? Now, the average couple actually is only about 1 to 2 times a week, because of just different factors in life and things that happen. There's a great song by Flight of the Conchords, if you know that band.
Yes.
You know them? There's a song called
yeah.
Business Time. I don't think we can play it, but you can go and look it up if you want to. It's hilarious. But it just celebrates, a couple. But he says, tonight we're going to make love. And you know how I know? Because it's Wednesday.
So schedule. It's on the schedule.
So it's on the schedule. This
Yes.
this happens. Here's the thing, guys. If a couple is we just really need to know how to make sure this is a priority in our life, it sounds really unromantic.
Yeah.
But you got to put it on a calendar sometimes,
You do.
right? You got to at least have the plan. You got to at least say to each other, so what day this week is it going to happen? And maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe it's not every Wednesday or, whatever, but maybe it's, you sit down on Sunday afternoon and you say, let's take a look at our week together, and let's just make sure we put a little star on the calendar for the day that this is going to happen this week. The days this week that it's going to happen. There's a cool Bebo Norman song where he sings about it just feels right kissing on a Sunday, and I disagree with him. So it depends on where you want to put that, right? But but you asked about the spark, because
it's more than just
it's easy enough to say, right? Like let's just put it on the calendar and let's just make it happen, right? And as a woman, are you like, if we just put it on the calendar, just make it happen? Like you're just going to be like, yep. Yeah. No. There's an old saying that men are microwaves, women are crock pots.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Accurate.
And so how do you have the spark that gets you there? So there's an older researcher by the name of Robert Sternberg. He was doing his research back in the 70s. And he came up with this brilliant theory called the triangular theory of love. So if you imagine a triangle for a second, maybe you can edit this in as a graphic or something on a podcast. I don't know.
There's the graphic right there.
So imagine a triangle. And on the top point of the triangle is the word commitment. And on the bottom left of the triangle is the word passion. And on the bottom right is the word intimacy. So he was looking at these three dimensions to love. And when he said intimacy, he didn't mean, we usually use the word intimacy as a euphemism for sex, but he was talking about the heart-to-heart connection, that kind of what we were talking about with communication before. So that's intimacy. Passion was where the romance and the sex and all that comes in. And then commitment is that I decide for this relationship. I decide for you, right? And what he discovered as he was researching this whole theory was that if somebody looks at their marriage and says, let's say, John is like, hey, Aaron and I haven't really been romantic lately. And so what do I do about that? And John might go and say, okay, I got an idea. I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna make sure the kids are doing whatever they're. I'm gonna have the girls are all gonna go and they're gonna go out to a movie or whatever. And I'm gonna set the table. I'm gonna put candles. I'm gonna have flowers. I'm gonna make a nice dinner. I'm gonna have some wine.
Allie likes this idea. Make sure you mention this to Jake.
Yeah, Jake, if you're listening, just so you know. So she walks in, right, and what does she do? She sees that you've set up this beautiful romantic table, right? Mm-hmm. And the first thing that goes through her head is, John wants me to have sex with him tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why does that happen? Why does she suddenly feel this letdown? Almost this like, oh, really?
Yeah.
When you've done all this stuff. And what Sternberg said is because you're actually lacking the other pieces. And that this feels like where the problem is, but it's not where the problem is. The problem is in the other places. And so he said, if you want to foster that passion, don't set the table with flowers and candles and all of that sort of thing. Go and when she gets home, you say, the girls are out for a movie and we got the next 2 hours. Would you like to just go for a walk together? Like we could walk for the next 2 hours. Well, let's go down to the river and let's walk on the river. I grabbed, I got a couple of bento boxes of some sushi or whatever, whatever she likes. Mm-hmm. We'll have some food. We'll grab some ice cream at Culver's and we'll just walk and we'll just talk. And we'll just connect. Mm-hmm. And, you do that and suddenly she's going to be like, I feel connected to you again. Mm-hmm. Right. And then she's going to feel more in the mood for that. Yeah. Right. I love John Gray, the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. In one of his books, he tells this hilarious story where his wife had been begging him for a long time to go to the opera. And he was like, I don't like going to the opera. The opera is so dumb. These people are singing in language you can't understand and ear-piercing noise. And he's like, I don't want to go to the opera. She's like, please take me to the opera. He's like, no, I don't want to go to the opera. He's like, But he's also saying, but hey, we haven't been intimate very much lately, And she's like, well, take me to the opera. He's like, really? Like, I got to, pay for that? Finally, one day he's like, all right. So he buys the opera tickets. They go to the opera. He's like, I got to stay locked in. I'm a marriage counselor. I got to do the right thing. So he's like, this is annoying. I'm bored. My butt hurts. I don't want to do this, but I got to stay in the moment. So he stays in the moment and she's just happy. Like, she's just like, the opera. This is so great. And they get home and what he wrote was they pulled into the garage and the second that garage door closed all the way, she grabbed him, pulled him over to her side of the car and made love to him right there in the car. And he said the next morning he woke up and looked around, grabbed the phone and said, so how much are season tickets to the opera?
Yeah, exactly.
But what he was really illustrating, it's kind of just a silly story, but it illustrates that connecting with her outside of the passion and the romance was what made a difference to her. Now, flip that around though, because for guys, when a girl says, I feel like he's just not opening up. He just won't talk to me. And I feel like he's just closed off from me.
Is that your impersonation of women?
I'm sorry, is it really bad?
You might need to work on it.
I know, I do that sometimes, and my wife is like, that's not how we talk.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yep.
well, okay.
Okay. Yep.
I'll give it to you this time. That's right.
Just trying to have a softer and gentler voice.
Yes.
Girls, fine. Like what? Tell it to me the right way, Ellie.
Just kidding.
No. Just
Now you got to. You called it out. You got to.
I really wish you would just open up more.
That's great. Okay,
Yeah,
Now,
see?
now I'm feeling it.
okay.
Yeah. There's a little smoke behind that one.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay.
Here's the thing. If she says, I just want him to open up. So when he comes home, I'm going to tell him, let's go for a 3-hour walk. He's going to be like, are you kidding me? I don't. Okay. But he'd be like, whatever, right? That's that same thing that John Gray was talking about. I don't want to go to the opera, right? But so if he walks in and she's like, hey, I got the kids to the movie. Why don't you come on with me to the bedroom? Suddenly he's going to say, now I'm willing to be that open. And that almost feels transactional. It's not transactional, though. It's just that she's recognizing she has to meet his need too.
Sure.
And for guys tend to open up and connect when they feel sexually satisfied. And girls tend to feel sexually interested when they feel intimately connected.
Well, that's
And
really
so-
backwards, by the way. That's like, it's like the chicken and the egg, which comes first then.
Right. And so which do you do? And here's what Sternberg would have said. There's a third point on that triangle. And that third point on the triangle is commitment. And here's the thing, right? Because when it comes to passion, there are a lot of factors that can get in the way, right? You might be sick. You might just have kids pawing at you all day and you're like, the last thing I want to do is be touched. You might have all kinds of things weighing on your mind and you just can't get in the moment. Same with intimacy. It may be like, we are just two ships passing the night. We do not have time for each other. I'm feeling just very tense and I don't have the right words and I just don't want to open up because it just feels weird to do so right now. And so there are factors that get in the way of those things, but commitment, you can always decide to do what's best for the marriage.
Yeah.
Every day you can wake up and say, whatever it takes to make this marriage better, I'm going to do that today.
Yeah.
Whether or not I feel like it, because that's what commitment is really there for, is to say, it doesn't matter if I feel it. What matters is what's best.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do what's best. And so Sternberg's advice was just lean into commitment and then whichever one is opposite from the one you feel most lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you're going to foster the one that you need to work on.
Can I summarize this so that because we want to talk about faith and,
Wow, man, we got a lot of
growing.
stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So here, I'm glad you said all that you said because in my mind I was hoping to bring this up if you didn't. But if I could summarize that, what I hear you saying is, for the wives, emotional connection brings physical connection.
Yes.
For the guys, physical connection brings the emotional connection. The commitment part is that serving. We serve each other.
Yes.
So for the husbands, I'm going to serve you by, not to get something, but you want emotional connection. I'm going to serve you in that emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
Wives, you're going to serve your husbands by bringing that physical connections, which what guy doesn't want his wife to initiate and to step towards that?
Mm-hmm.
If both sides are faithfully doing that, that's a recipe for a great marriage.
Yes.
Right. Ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. But once again, you said the word intentionality earlier. I mean, that's what it takes. It takes
You
being
have to
on
choose.
purpose.
You have to choose
choosing
to do it.
this marriage and choosing to prioritize it over the other things that you might want.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And and just to be clear, we're speaking very stereotypically here.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're in a different place as a couple, I've had couples in my office where the wife is the one with a much higher sex drive and the guy is, got a lot more emotional needs, and that's okay. That happens.
Mm-hmm.
I once heard a guy say, sometimes, when given a choice between sex and a ham sandwich, the guy's going to choose the ham sandwich. I mean, that's also true.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where guys I'm doing okay with that. So it's not like this is this isn't a program. It's not software.
Correct.
It's not like you can just be plug in X, you get Y. It's not how it works all the time. But in general, these things tend to hold true. So the other thing that's really important to this whole dynamic is also to recognize that both husbands and wives want they want to feel companionship with their spouse. And all of this has to do with companionship.
Yes.
It's that feeling of I'm not alone in life. I'm not facing my challenges alone, right? And sexual intimacy gives you that sense of I'm not alone. And emotional intimacy gives you that sense that I'm not alone. Recreational companionship also says I'm not alone. So a lot of guys want recreational companionship. They want to do the things they love to do. Like whether if they like to go shooting guns, they want to go shoot guns with their wife at their side.
Yes.
They want her to want to shoot the guns too.
Yeah.
If the guy likes playing a board game, he wants her to play the board game with her. And then women, though, want emotional companionship. And so what they want is to be like, let me tell you about this thing that I've been dreaming about or this thing that's going through my mind all day. I want to share with you so that you go, oh, that's really cool. Come and enter that world. So it's learn to enter each other's worlds.
I'll game with some friends on Friday nights, and there's one guy that I game with whose wife loves to sit next to him while he's gaming, and we can hear her in the background like, that was great. Oh, that was so cool. And all of us guys are like, who is this?
Who's this?
Who is this woman that, and
She's a unicorn.
She just jumps into it. She jumps in because she loves to spend time with her
that's cool.
husband, and they do that. That's an anomaly, but I think that's a picture of like, she might not be interested in that, but she just loves to do that with him.
Yeah.
And similarly, crocheting. I don't know. What if the husband, what if he went and sat with her while she was doing that?
Yeah.
And, I don't like crocheting. I don't know how to crochet. But if my wife loved to do that, maybe I should you know what? I'm just going to go sit with her and ask her questions about it or whatever.
It's funny you use those examples because I like to play Zelda games. I always have ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'll play the Zelda game and my wife crochets next to me. And it's a perfect marriage.
My wife loves to read books, and I'll game, and she'll sit next to me.
We're just right there.
Yeah,
right
we
there.
love to do that too.
It's wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Allie, we have one more big topic to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, it goes back to some more awkward feelings maybe that some people have.
Well, I mean, we're talking about marriage. Everything's awkward for the people who are
Amen.
listening.
Yes.
Amen.
I counsel couples. Nothing's awkward for me anymore.
Yeah, you've seen it all. Yep.
I hear this a lot, right? I think in the church especially, we hear, couples, you should be praying with each other.
Oh, yeah.
And I hear that. I'm like, yeah. And then you put that into reality and you're like, this is really awkward.
Yeah.
At least it is for me. And I've heard from other people too. It's awkward.
Sure.
But it's so important. And I think it leads to some of that connectedness that we talked about. Like, it is so good for marriages on so many different levels. But why is it so hard? And how can we make it less awkward?
Yeah. I love the question because this is a question that couples ask all the time. And I would love to say my wife and I have found the perfect formula. We haven't.
No.
Actually,
we
the
haven't
truth
either.
is that despite our best intentions, we constantly will jump on the bandwagon for a while, then we'll fall off of it, then we jump back on it, and we fall off of it. And, if I don't take some time to be really intentional about trying to get us together in the Word and in prayer, it probably won't happen, right? And so in the end, this is one where I really do look at guys and say, God has called you to a position of leadership in your family life. When it says in Ephesians 5 that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, to have the love of Jesus for your wife. Think about that for a minute and the implications. Did Jesus wait for the church to initiate the relationship? Did Jesus wait for us to get our act together before he reached out to love us? Did Jesus, wait for us to say, can you please save me, for him to come to the cross? No, he said, this is my job. I'm doing this. And he stepped in, he initiates the relationship. And so if that's true and husbands are to reflect that, then husbands, you first. If you are looking at your family life and you're like, I see that we need spiritual connection, you first. Make the choice. Step up and do it. Now, what does that look like in practice? It doesn't have to be that hard, guys. Honestly, I know it feels awkward, but once again, it's one of those muscle things. Sure. Once you do it, it doesn't have to be that awkward anymore. Once you get used to it, you start to wonder, why did we ever go without this, right? Maybe I could just analogize it for a second. I remember getting some marriage advice at a conference once where the guy said, he actually had all the couples do this in the room, stand there and look in each other's eyes for 30 seconds straight. And after 15 seconds, you could just see there were people who were just like,
Gonna awkward giggle this away.
Right. And then he had the couples kiss for 7 seconds straight. And it was seconds, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. You're like, when is this going to end? And then but 7 seconds, suddenly it was after 7 seconds, you're like, this is actually kind of nice.
Mhm.
Well, actually, this isn't so bad. I can keep doing this,
Mhm.
right? And so what he was trying to teach was like make that a habit every day, where you stand before you go off to work, stand in the kitchen, hold each other, look at each other in the eyes for 30 seconds, and then kiss for 7 seconds. And it was like, oh, that's not a bad idea. Same can be true for our spiritual lives. Sit down, do the awkward thing, lean into it, and the next thing you know, you go, oh, this is really nice. So how do you read the Bible in a way that, like, just open it? Seriously, it's not as hard as all that, guys. Open the Bible, find a section that you both want to read, and you read it. Just read it out loud together, and then after you've read, say you read a chapter or even just a section of a chapter, and you just look at it and you go, so what did you notice? And it doesn't have to be a hard question. What did you notice? What jumped out to you? Just come up with one thing that you hadn't ever thought of before. And then talk about that. And then after you're done, you can just say, well, what should we pray about? And it can be anything, right? My wife and I pray about our kids all the time, right? We've got kids who have big plans in life, and we just want to see God do the most amazing things through them. And so we just pray about that. And then I'll pray for her to have strength and confidence to do what she does in her classroom. And I'll just pray for her. It's simple stuff. And sometimes, honestly, my prayer is literally I'll just pray the blessing over her. I'll put my hand on her shoulder and I'll just say, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look on you with favor and give you peace. And it's really amazing because as soon as I start doing that, I'll just like literally feel her whole body just like, like she just like melts because it's just so relaxing for her to just be like, my husband is speaking the blessing over me. And I didn't have to come up with the words. I didn't have to figure out what the right words to say. I just said the words God says.
But so, right, this is great. The husband's supposed to lead and the wife, right? I think there are a lot of women, speaking for the women out there, their men won't. They're not leading. They're not stepping up. So what are we supposed to do in those moments when our husbands aren't stepping up?
I was thinking, like, while you were talking, like, guys sometimes just need a direct instruction. I feel like sometimes, like, for guy to guy, be like, guys, are you listening right now? Do it. Just do it. But for the ladies, if there might not be a guy in their life that can, for the guys to say that to, what do wives say to their husbands?
Yeah, can
Honey,
we encourage
could
that?
you-
How?
Which I think
how
is
do we get in
great.
there?
Yeah, I think so.
How do we get in there?
Okay, so if we're talking about a husband who is a Jesus follower, and that's a big if, right? Because there are plenty of women who come into my office, tears in their eyes. I thought he would change. I thought he would come to the faith. He hasn't. What do I do? I'm alone, Okay, that's a whole different conversation though, right?
Yeah.
But if you're talking about a husband who is a Jesus follower, and you're, and honestly, I hope there are some of those husbands who are watching this who are themselves sitting there going, I'm not doing very much with the
Feeling
leadership.
pretty
And I'm just going to be like, hey, dude,
Yeah.
dude, just do it.
Do it. Do it.
Don't make your wife ask for it. But if she's asking for it, right? Okay, so how does that look as the wife? Like, can you go to your husband and be like, I need to tell you something. I really want to be led spiritually. I just really want you to lead. And this is what I'm looking for from you. So if you're a wife watching this and you're like, well, what do I ask him to do? Maybe you just say, can we just sit down and open the Bible? Can you please lead me in that? And can you please make this a priority for us? Like, just ask him. And here's the thing that I think, and this going back to what I said about my wife and I not being perfect in this. I don't know how many times she has asked me for that. And I have had to say, you're right.
Yep.
And that's a moment of that. Okay, we talked in the last episode about walking through the steps of forgiveness. Apologizing and saying, you're right, I'm not being a really great spiritual leader right now, and I need to be better. And so then going back to the first principles of what is this about? I am here to love as Jesus loves, to serve. John's been saying to be the one trying to outdo in serving. And so I have to get that. I have to get that conviction. But a lot of times it starts by my wife just asking me.
Sure. Just start there.
Yeah.
Start with an ask.
Yeah, just start with an ask.
Yeah.
And because here's the thing. If you're a wife saying, I wish my husband would lead, but he just won't, how many times have you actually asked him?
Sure.
And if you've asked him a lot of times and he's just said no for a lot of different reasons, then I would say that's probably a good time to go and say, can we talk to our pastor about this? Because your shepherd at church has the role of going and kicking your husband in the pants, right? That's part of his job. And so he might be the one who has to come and be like, dude, your wife's been talking to me and you're not doing your job. So end of story, buddy. This is changes today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's okay for a shepherd to do. He should be doing that.
Yeah.
And the husband should receive that. He should say, okay, all right, I got to be directed by this guy. So it's okay to take it that next level if you have to. But I'm going to say a lot of times, if the wife hasn't even made that ask, it could be going back to kind of what we were talking about the last session about, I'm assuming he just knows.
Yeah.
And maybe he needs to have it brought back to his mind.
Yeah. Or it's like, I shouldn't have to ask.
Right.
But no, you should ask anyway. Like, humble yourself enough to just ask.
Yeah.
And from the husband's perspective, I think if my wife were to come and speak in like a respectful tone and like seeking connection, like, what would really help me and I think I would love to do with you is a devotion and prayer. We don't do that right now. Could we do that?
Yeah.
If my wife, which she has done, I'm like, yeah, we should. You're right. I'm not like, stop bullying me or anything. I'm not, if she's speaking lovingly and kindly and respectfully, I'm probably going to receive that. And guys, if your wives do that, receive it. If they're speaking respectfully, they want to connect, they want to be spiritually led, listen and act.
Well, and as a husband who, once again, my wife and I, we are very different in terms of our strengths. And my wife has consistency and discipline in her top 5. So for her, if we get on this train for a while, she'll stay on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if she then kind of says like, well, I'm going to wait until he brings it up, like she's asking me to play to my lowest possible strengths.
Yeah.
I'm
so I've tried
guilty
to,
of that.
Yeah.
right. So I've tried to tell her like, listen, I want to lead you in this, but it's true that there are days where I've got 100 different things on my mind and this gets booted out for whatever reason. It's the devil working against me. It's my own sinful nature, just trying to avoid the responsibility, whatever it is. This does not rise to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the strength that would allow us to stay connected this way. And if you would just exercise that strength by saying, hey, should we pull out the Bible right now? Like, that would be so helpful to me. And then that reminds me, I got to make a priority of this. And then, build that habit, build that muscle again, so that then it becomes something that I do, as well. And it's not that I'm asking her to lead, although maybe it feels to her sometimes like it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I'm asking her to help me. I'm asking her to be the suitable helper that God has designed her to be.
That's such an important distinction, because I do think we can fall into the trap of like, no, my husband's supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to do this for him, but we are supposed to help him.
Right.
And we should. And we should be joyful in doing that as well.
Yeah.
Which I think we never really talked about that, but I think the roles of husbands and wives is still important behind all this discussion. But sometimes I think wives can just take over. That can be a temptation. Like,
Sure.
I'm just going to be the one to say what's going to happen. That phrase that dangerous phrase I think we use, happy wife, happy life.
Yes.
Like, just make them happy, do whatever they want to do. But that's not really how God designed it.
Yeah.
Like, guys, you're supposed to leave, and the wife, like you said, to be that helper, which I like the term leading up.
Yeah.
Is what I've heard.
Sure.
You sometimes, even if you work in the workforce, sometimes you have to lead up to encourage your leaders. Hey, what would really help is if you did this. I think the wives in the same way. Instead of just saying, here's what we're going to do,
Right.
that shows like disrespect, and the guy's just going to shut down. But if you show yourself, hey, I want to help you, I want to walk with you, I think most guys will be very receptive to that.
I love that word helper too, because in Genesis we see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says he's going to make a suitable helper. And sometimes I have wives who get to that passage like, I don't like that. It makes me sound like I'm his assistant or something. But the word that's translated as helper is a Hebrew word, etzer, that is only ever used in the rest of Scripture to refer 3 times to a king who is a helper to his people, and all the rest of the times to God, who is the helper to his people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, far from being a lesser role, the word helper, when God calls the woman a helper for the man, is an elevation. Like, she is coming in and bringing things that he doesn't have to the table. And so when we talk about your spiritual life as a couple, to embrace the role of a helper that says, by joining with him in the struggle against the devil, the world, and our sinful nature that fights against our spiritual connection, to help him in that by encouraging him, by being alongside him, by the two of us together fighting for our faith. Man, what an amazing partnership that becomes.
Yeah.
And so just to embrace that role.
So good.
That's like the perfect place to wrap up today.
That was a bow.
Like, that was mic drop, boom.
And cut.
Yeah. Wow. That was great.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Brandon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
happy to do it. Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, we'll have you come back, talk some more about parenting at some point down the line. So if
Sounds
you
good,
have more
Jen.
marriage questions out there, or if you have parenting questions out there, we're going to bring Brandon back and hopefully a whole other slew of people. But feel free to drop that in the link in the description box. Jonathan, you want to take us out?
Hey, it has been a pleasure having you all with us today. Dr. Brandon Steenbock, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for sharing all your wisdom, and hope it was helpful for all of you out there. And we will see all of you next time here on Light Talks. Thanks for joining us today.